Hey everybody, welcome to Love and Reload, the voice of the relocation industry. I'm your host, Ben Cross, and I'm so blessed and honored to be here with our second election special. It's post-election. We're still basking in the afterglow of this momentous U.S. election here. It's definitely one to remember forever. We wanted to kind of talk about it a little bit with some immigration experts here in the global mobility space. We have Tiffany Derentz here, Senior Counsel of BAL, and we have Anindita Chowdhury here, Managing Attorney and Principal at USILAW. This is an election that promises to make us think, make us work extra hard as global mobility executives to try to figure out these problems. Get in the comments. I want to hear your thoughts, your questions about this election and the impacts to immigration and global mobility. Let us know who you are, where you are. Check in with us. And Tiffany, first, where are you in the world today?
I am actually based in Washington, D.C., not too far from the White House.
Wow. Okay. So you're going to be there. You might even be at the party or something, just like, hey, how's it going? Maybe helping with the move. Who knows? And Anindita, where in the world are you?
Been based in the Maryland area since 1996, since I came down to DC, but specifically right now in Bethesda, Maryland. That's where our headquarters are based out of.
I love it. So we're bringing these minds from the nation's capital. I mean, people cannot be any more plugged in right now. And Tiffany and Anindita, I know I'm going to ask you the impossible to tell us what's going to happen in the next 4 years based on 2 days of data here. But we're gonna try anyway, okay? Because that's what makes it entertaining, right?
Absolutely.
Let's see here. Christina checking in. We got people checking in from all over. Looking forward to hearing what the thoughts are. Yes, for real. Ask questions too, Christina. I know you're at RMC as well. I'd love to also hear, Christina, I think you're in Mexico still. So let us know what people are thinking kind of from your vantage point. Janet here to listen from Central Florida. Yeah, Janet's on the international shipping side of relocation, so I'm sure she's going to know if volumes are going to be up, down, around. Jana Chazanaski here from Brazil. We've got 3 countries so far. Really looking forward to hearing about the hot topics. Jana, I'd love to know what people are thinking from a Brazilian standpoint. Rachel Longo, North Dallas. Hey, close to home for me. What's up, Rachel? Rachel's an immigration expert as well. Brittany is immigration as well here in Dallas. Christian Ternedden from Orange County. Get in the comments, hit that like button. I want to know what questions you have for our immigration experts today. Yes. Chelsea saying, I'm looking forward to these updates every 4 years. Yeah. What are we going to do in the meantime? I want to ask you a little bit about just the general vibe, right? General vibe. 2 days out. This is a big election. Some people say the biggest in some of our lifetimes, a lot of impacts. But I mean, before we get into the tactical, just what's the general vibe and the mood out there? And Tiffany, I'm going to ask you first.
I mean, being in DC, which is obviously where the Biden administration is right now, very new. I think the general vibe is a little size right now, maybe not as jovial as those that are celebrating the Trump win. But also, I think just, coming from the immigration background, I previously worked in the government, a lot of probably anxiety over the next 4 years and just kind of trying to take some time to process everything and focus on yourself and kind of just gear up and get ready for what's to come over the next 4 years.
Yeah, really interesting. As I was watching the exit polls from the election, I was staying up late, and like everybody else probably, and watching this, they talk about some of the issues that were top of mind for voters, and one of the top 4 issues was immigration. One of the top 4 most cited, most important issues was immigration. And I feel like sometimes we conflate these issues, right? Anindita, how does that kind of that fervor that's been around immigration and all that, how does that maybe kind of tinge a little bit the conversation around business immigration?
Correct. I mean, I was going to distinguish that considering, the hats all 3 of us wear. I think there was some anger, if I can speak my mind, with the undocumented immigration that we definitely have in this country. And, very objectively speaking, there should be some rules and regulations around that. But what we are working together today to discuss is the legal immigration. And in my humble opinion, it is without a doubt that the legal immigration is what fuels the American ambition. It's what fuels the American dream. The US of A, to remain the leader in global technology, has to, non-negotiable, to support legal immigration. And that's what we all both do, Tiffany and myself. And essentially, that is the crux of, I think, what we want to discuss today. We do anticipate, just based on our experience from the previous Trump era, there have been a lot of talk about some restrictions, some limitations, an increase in investigations, whatever that may be, and that would be what we'd be discussing over the course of the next hour. But all of that being said, we should primarily focus on one thing only, that for the roles that we have to be the trusted partner for any of the companies that we are privileged to represent. And there, I guess the biggest challenge we have right now is not to be reactive, is to be proactive, to pivot, because as we have experienced in the previous term, there are lots of things that come out in executive orders, lots of things that are just in tweets. So in that environment, I doubt whether that will change. So how do we as partners work together with our clients to basically help them and bring this global talent to this great country?
Well, and I wanted to ask about that. I'm glad you brought that up, because we've looked at the use of executive orders, and they've been increasing with presidents in recent history, and the Trump administration was kind of famous for these. What kind of executive orders could you foresee happening potentially, and how might they affect the employment-based visa system in 2025? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I have some data about the previous administration just as a history. If history should repeat itself and then go from there. The administration previously has a history of issuing close to 220 executive orders during 2017 to 2021. The administration enacted 472 administrative changes in immigration during the same period, and 39 more proposed, which were unimplemented because the term ended. And we expect, I think Tiffany will support me in this, the first 100 days of this presidency, we expect it to be very volatile.
Yeah, are they going to come right out the gate? I mean, Tiffany, do you think they're going to come right out of the gate and just start issuing these right away? Or is there going to be like a settling in period? Or are they have a list over here and they're just going to implement?
I think that we're going to have action on day one. And I think those first 100 days in particular are going to be very chaotic. I think if you step back for a second, when Trump took over the Oval Office in 2017, no one really knew what to expect. He said things during his campaign, but you didn't know what those 4 years would hold. But that's not the case now. If you look back at his first term, and we just went over a list of actions that he did. If you look at the things he's been saying during his campaign, and if you look at Project 2025, that all shows you what to expect. And I think on day one, he's going to rescind all of the Biden executive orders and presidential proclamations, and he will put in place probably another travel ban with a set list of countries, and maybe even go further to target either other countries or other groups of people. And they've had 4 years to prepare for this, so they're going to come in and hit the ground running. And those are some immediate things he can do because it's executive authority. It's his authority to use to restrict the travel to the U.S. And then over the course of the next 100 days and going into the next few years, you'll see some of those other policies start to change as well.
Really interesting. Get in the comments here. I want to know what your thoughts are, what questions you have for Tiffany and Anindita about this. I have kind of a question here. And Anindita, first I'm going to ask you, do you agree with what Tiffany's saying as far as the travel bans? Because that's something you could see, early and somewhat widespread.
Absolutely. I mean, without a doubt, I agree with her. I mean, if you were to do what we consider like a 2025 overview, we have put it in like 4 different categories. Executive orders and the policy changes is totally foreseeable. I mean, we anticipate, probably starting from day one, potential newer executive orders can bring significant disruptions to what we do, that's employment-based visas. There's definitely going to be a ramp up. Not that the Biden-Harris administration was any less compliant on ICE investigations and all, but definitely a specific ramp up on compliance and enforcement, then definitely global mobility will be affected, which will have an effect on the consular part of people getting visas to actually travel and come to the country. These are on the professional visas, the H's, the L's, the T's, the O's. And then overall, which would be a contributing factor, which would be a tightened pathway to legal immigration. And like Tiffany said, he's made it very clear that that's the agenda, at least as published in Project 2025.
I got a question here that came in. Keep these questions coming because I do want to prioritize the questions from the audience here. Christina asks, do we have an idea of what countries may be on that travel ban list?
I mean, based on experience, based on Muslim countries, right? Every Muslim origin country. So that would be an easy answer. Tiffany, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, that's exactly what I was going to say is the one travel ban that went all the way to the Supreme Court and has that Supreme Court precedent behind it now is the Muslim travel ban. And it was primarily Muslim-based countries that were targeted for basically the entire administration. So I think that is definitely one to, like, those countries are ones to keep an eye on.
Are these countries, from a global mobility standpoint, what could be the impact to our talent pipeline and to our corporate clients if that were to go into effect?
I mean, IMEA, the Middle East is one of the main countries that would be, I guess, Muslim origin, has definitely and has increased over the last decade quite a presence in global mobility, both into the US and to their surrounding countries. But I mean, predominantly, if you look at US immigration, if you look at H's and L's, 70% of the H's are from India. The citizens are from Indian nationalities. Then there's Chinese, then there are Filipinos, many other countries around the world, Brazil, every place else. So, last time there was a travel ban against India, but the explanation for that was COVID. So, if we don't have another reoccurrence of COVID, that should not justifiably be a travel ban, a country to be denoted to be a travel ban. But, still, just on the principle of Muslims not being allowed to enter the US, is definitely less restricting to business immigration.
I think the COVID travel ban is an interesting one to bring up too, because I actually was previously in the government at the State Department during Trump's first administration. And we distinguished internally the travel bans that were country specific, like the Muslim travel ban, from the COVID travel bans as a reaction to the pandemic. But I have been in the private sector for a few years now, and another way to look at those travel bans are targeted at the labor market. And if, there's precedent for doing that. So if you put in place other labor market specific bans, even without a pandemic, like there's a possibility that you have some of these work categories that are targeted irrespective of the country of nationality.
Well, let's talk about India for a second, and because it is our biggest talent source, right? When we look at percentage wise, Brittany has a question here. Put a percentage. I'm gonna ask you to go out on a limb here and put a percentage on this. Do you foresee travel bans for India? What percentage chance does that have? Brittany's asking.
I mean, I'm a little passionate about this, Tiffany. If I can start with the response, Prime Minister Modi and President-elect Trump, were best buddies. They were BFFs. And essentially, in the first term, one of the requests that the Indian diaspora had made a request to the Prime Minister was, could you at least do something on the per-country limitations? Currently, for an Indian national, to get a green card in this country, it can take anywhere between 17 to 18 to 25 years. 22 to 25 years because of the backlog. I mean, it's currently being processed for 2012. So on the calendar wise, it just looks, it's only like 12 years, but that date doesn't move every month. So it could take anywhere between 15 to 20 years for Indian national to get a green card. But the world, I don't want to get into an immigration 101, but then there are visa categories for definitively 4 buckets: Indians, Chinese, there's Philippines, Mexicans, and then there's some Central American countries, and then the rest of the world. So there was an appeal or a request made so that the Prime Minister Modi would communicate to Trump, who he was so close to release the unused visas for Indian nationals. And it's now 8 years and nothing got done. So my hope and my expectation is something should be done. Realistically, will something be done? Probably not, if you ask me, because I've experienced it. I've watched the quota or the backlog grow. I've been doing this from 1993, so I've seen green cards being processed in 4 months, around the times that I got mine, many years ago. But now it's ridiculous what's happening, and the wait times are just crazy.
I want to keep going. I got some other questions here, and I've got people that are having questions as well here in comments. And so keep your questions coming into the comments here. Rachel says, exactly what Tiffany said, we were preparing for a repeat and remembering what occurred and running reports for awareness. And I was going to ask you, how quickly could these executive orders affect the existing work visas, the H-1B, the L-1, and what action should our corporate partners be taking kind of proactively? I mean, here we are, we're sitting in November. We know he takes office in January. We got a few months to kind of figure some things out, right, to be proactive. What types of actions should we be taking right now?
As far as how it can impact the work visa categories, pretty much immediately. And there's one thing I'll distinguish there is that at least historically, and that doesn't mean that that's necessarily going to be what is going forward, but at least historically, any of these proclamations and executive orders have not impacted current visa holders that were in the United States. It impacted anybody who is abroad trying to get a visa to come back in the United States. So anybody who's already here and has that valid visa, at least historically, we weren't revoking visas. Sorry, my light went off. We weren't revoking visas. We were not, and I say we too, because I was in the government at this time. There was no visas revoked. There were no, automatic denials or anything for anybody that was in the United States. It was for people that were outside of the United States. But as far as planning, one thing that we've been telling our clients, for most of this year is to really look at your people and what statuses they're in, when statuses are expiring, and look at who you might want to protect, so to speak, before the inauguration, and make plans to communicate with your personnel about traveling for the holidays and making sure that you're back in the United States by the inauguration, because on day one we expect there to be executive action, and that could be turned around in as little as 24 hours. Typically they give a little notice, 72 hours or so, but it will be very, very fast.
Our advice has been sort of similar to Tiffany's, but a little more aggressive, to the sense that, hey, look at every extension, amendment, petitions that you have in the pipeline, to literally reevaluate them and see what you can pretty much file before Jan 19th. And we have experienced, for example, in October 2020, there was just through an executive order, the previous president, basically stated that all prevailing wages will have to be level 3. And that's pretty much what stuck till there was a court case and a follow-up injunction. So there were no filings that could be done, especially for junior level people who should deserve level 1 or level 2. So what does that mean for those of us who might be unfamiliar with the prevailing wage? Is somebody you should be paying per prevailing wage requirements, a 65 or a 70 or a 75, suddenly you're forced to file a petition only if you're paying them like 145, which just doesn't work in the real world. So literally that froze all filings for a good 4 to 6 weeks. So, anticipating something like that coming along, the agenda is clear your plate by Jan 19th, and find a partner you can work with who will prepare strong petitions that will not get RFE'd, will not get denied. And that's what we literally do for a living, and just pivot, and be proactive rather than reactive.
I want to ask about, as businesses are thinking about planning, right, and being proactive on the immigration side, but also on the talent side. I mean, global mobility really is a function of talent. It's the tactics that go with the talent strategy. And how do companies, in your opinion, need to maybe change their recruitment strategy to take into account the added risks in this new administration?
Do you want me to start?
Yes,
Okay.
please.
I'll start with just saying, I think looking at that recruitment, sort of bigger picture, where are you looking for your talent? How much of your talent pool is coming from prior students in the United States? Because that's a category that could be targeted in their ability to stay in the US. And so that might impact that. But then also just the planning stages. You might need to take into account a longer process for many reasons. And take that into account when you are doing that recruiting and that hiring, because it's not, instead of say 6 months or 1 year, it might be a year and a half or 2 years before you have those employees. And you want to make sure that people are aware of that timeline and can make adjustments, just kind of like bigger picture as they're looking at that recruitment.
To what, if I can just add to what Tiffany said, I mean, essentially, we categorize this, in a few sections: accelerate the visa filings, like we both referenced, strengthen compliance programs, prepare for the H-1B program changes, conduct internal immigration audits and contingency planning, and most definitely review dependent work authorizations, H-4s, more than L-2s probably will be targeted, and just engage in legislative and political advocacy. Ben, as you know, in the WRC, we sponsored the Advocacy Day, just to be more aggressive and more committed to get your message across. That's non-negotiable, unfortunately, in the current environment.
You bring up a really good point here, and there's a really handsome gentleman in the comments who had a question about STEM OPT. And he says, Nafis Chowdhury says, what do you think will happen to STEM OPT?
I mean, Project 2025 definitely mentions that he wants to do away with STEM OPT. If that is to actually be implemented, that'd be the most unfortunate thing, because the talent that we have invested in raising will be going back to their home countries or nearshoring, be it Mexico, be it Canada, although Canada is now starting with a new government, more draconian laws towards their ICTs and other immigration visa options. But we lose the talent if it is implemented. I mean, STEM OPTs, the government extended, especially for STEM OPTs, 36 months to find a job. There's a reason for that, because at the end of the day, these young students that have been nurtured by US universities, we deserve in the US to get the benefit of their brains. The brain drain of this country, of this world, happens to be only in one country, that's the US of A. Stopping STEM is going to be devastating. Alternatively, I'll just add one last thing before I give the floor to Tiffany. President-elect Trump has also mentioned, when he was in some gathering of some Indian businessmen, that for some meeting, most recently, like this was in the midst of the election campaigns, that every STEM student should be given an automatic green card after he or she graduates. So we have to wait and see what actually happens.
Well, aren't those like the opposite things?
Yeah.
Like polar opposite. I mean, so it shows you that what is said on the campaign trail and in rooms full of donors isn't necessarily always what is done. I mean, sometimes they're diametrically opposed, and you can't possibly accomplish them all. And Tiffany, you mentioned kind of Project 2025, and it's written there and it's exhaustive, right? And it mentions him quite a bit. And then, of course, he says, I don't know anything about this. And how much of this stuff is legit and real? I mean, you worked under this administration at one point, or, in the government at that time, I believe, right? I mean, what is your thoughts? What is your sense? What's your feeling about that?
I mean, I know he's tried to distance himself from this, but if you look at the prior administration, and don't hold me to this number, but I'm almost positive that it was about 60% of the ideas that came from Project 2025 were implemented in the first administration. So that's pretty significant. So I think that that's definitely something people should pay attention to. And just one point that I find very interesting is, with anything around like the students and the STEM and artificial intelligence and things like that, we as the US should want to attract and retain the best talent and keep it here. And we're spending, 4 to 6 to 8 years educating some of the best and the brightest at our universities, and then forcing them to go back and use all of the skills that they learned in another country, as opposed to finding ways to keep them here, which supports the US economy and US businesses and US jobs. And so I think some of the Biden policies, like relating to STEM, relating to bridging the gap for students to help them get here and stay for jobs and have that dual intent to make it easier to stay here, they seem at odds with what you would want for your economy here. And so it will be interesting to see if he follows through with some of that, or if his position changes at all. But I know I've heard things like revoking Biden's AI executive order, which is, it's all about trying to use that intelligence and trying to attract and retain talent here.
Yeah, it would be really a shame, because then you almost wonder, like, are people even going to come to school here in the first place if they don't think they can stay? Why not just go to the UK or Canada or Australia, or, pick one, right? So, and then we never even get a crack on them, and then we start to lose like that whole, I mean, I think America's position as the top destination for global talent has been our key value proposition since we were formed, frankly, right? I mean, it was a place where people wanted to come and live out their dream. And that, I think that culture, right? If we think about our hiring culture as a country, that company culture has attracted the best and brightest through history. And it's why we're home to the biggest companies in the world. And I just hope it doesn't go the other way,
No, I mean, if I can just add a couple of points to what we're discussing now. If you come to think of it, these students, like Tiffany mentioned, that they've been in the academic program, if they've come for their master's, they finished their PhD, you're looking at least a 6 to 8 years of grooming, not just academically, but into the American infrastructure. It would be so easy. It's a no-brainer for us to find creative alternatives for the brain drain of the world, to absorb it back into this society, which will then bolster our economy. And alternatively, what we are seeing is, because there are limited alternatives, for example, last year, not this immigration year, the previous year, there were close to 900,000 registrants for the HCAP, and only 65,000, were selected, and 20 more if you had US degrees. This year, it was close to 500,000. Where do these kids, who then don't have options, not everybody can file an O1, not everybody can file, plethora of immigration options that are there, go back to their home countries? Coming from the country I come from, India, has been benefited from this the most in the last decade. If you look at the entrepreneurial spirit that these young kids, all foreign educated, primarily US educated, went back and created businesses, but guess where? In India, not in the US, when US is the one that has invested in them. But if you look at the contribution to immigrants in this country, I mean, the largest company in the US right now by market value, NVIDIA. Where is the gentleman from? Jensen Huang from Taiwan. Need I say more when it comes to, Apple, Microsoft, Microsoft, at least the administration, the CEO is an immigrant, Google, and the name goes on and on and on. Why are we shooting ourselves in the foot by giving up voluntarily this talent that we have invested in?
Well, you wonder too. I mean, talking out of both sides, right? I mean, Trump's been very clear that, or it seems like clear, that Elon Musk is going to get a cabinet position or something, right? Well, he's an immigrant, right? I mean, he's case in point of this immigrant that's created one of the most valuable companies in the world, right? And I always marvel at the disconnect in people's brains, frankly, beyond like where they came from, where they're at now, and then how they can't remember to reach back and continue to do those things. I have questions here. Keep the comments coming in, the questions. I want to keep those coming. I want to prioritize those. Christian says, immigration from India and China into the U.S., particularly in tech, trending up or down?
Up, with every opportunity that they have. And whatever we cannot retain goes back to the home countries, like I just said.
Yeah, I definitely think it's up. One interesting thing that I did hear not too long ago, though, was that from a visa perspective, the demand still hasn't quite returned to pre-pandemic levels. So there's some uncertainty as to why, but I think as far as, tech talent coming to the US, it's still definitely up.
I mean,
No,
I guess
yeah,
one good thing is a revalidation program that was introduced by the Biden administration allows at least Indian nationals to get their visas in the country so that they're not subjected to long wait times and they'll get stuck in their home country. So that's just a quick addition to what Tiffany was saying. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting what you say about the demand, but yet we saw the applications, I think last year, what did y'all just say, 900,000 or something like that applications. So how do we reconcile those two thoughts?
So I think
That's
there's been, yeah,
Go
this
ahead.
is my former agency. I was at State Department in the visa office, and I think that there's been a lot of pressure on the State Department, especially from the travel and tourism industry, from the business industry, from every industry, basically the schools, everybody, to get visa wait times down, because you had the prior administration and then you had COVID. And that drove up backlogs significantly. So there was a ton of pressure on them to do everything that they could to issue more and more visas. And a lot of the reason they have been able to issue as many visas as they were is because they used interview waiver authorities and didn't require as many people to come into the embassies and consulates. But that is something that Trump previously took away. There's a limited authority for it in the law, but they're using it as broadly as they can right now. And this is something that previously went away. And so if this goes away, then I think that the domestic renewal program that you brought up is also very much in question, because that is reliant on being able to use interview waiver, because there's not an ability to interview people here from the State Department side.
Really interesting insight. Anindita, how much of this is about changing, the laws, and how much of it's about just the way that these things are enforced?
I mean, there is a system. There is a legal system to changing laws that are required. I mean, there are a few things that need to be changed, but you go through, introducing it as a comment period, then you go through Congress. There is this, the administration has a system to do it. What we are anxious about is, honestly speaking, the tweets and the executive orders, which then just build this environment of nervousness. At the end of the day, I can speak for myself, being an immigrant, a proud immigrant 34 years ago. Till today, I feel the pain of all our clients. Specifically, I guess, during the Trump administration, I would jokingly say, but, partially jokingly, I said, I'm not an attorney, but I'm a combination between a businesswoman and a shrink. So it's just a nurturing part of what our jobs are, has to be that assurance that no, you're in good hands, no, you will not get kicked out, no, you are okay, and we'll protect you, is the minimum requirement that we should be extending to the partners we work with and their employees.
It's a really good point. And speaking, and I see a couple of questions coming in here. Keep the questions coming in. We're going to get to all of them. Nafis, Richard from London, what's up? We got a bunch of countries represented here. Farrell, skip you. Okay, Farrell, no doubt. Got you. Question, though, about compliance and enforcement. What areas are most likely to come under scrutiny, in your opinion? Tiffany, I'd like to ask you that, and then Anindita.
Yeah, there will be a huge focus on compliance. And even in the last several years, there's been a higher focus on employer compliance and investigations into those actions by a lot of companies. And so I think that, pretty much anything, given the tone that the elected officials have set so far, I think pretty much anything is at risk, and there's going to be a much heavier focus on compliance across the board. But they're going to be looking at anything from pay to, are you in the right status, to, you're seeing even things at the state level with, in Texas, this recent law where you have to check the immigration status before you provide health care to somebody. I think you're going to see it even down through the states.
Wow. Yeah, it's really interesting. Anindita, what are your thoughts?
Definitely concur in what we see, what we anticipate. ICE investigations will increase significantly, which would be pretty much site visits, I-9 audits, maybe LCA PAF audits. If there is non-compliance, the amount of penalty and fines will be astronomical. Overall, definitely enhanced compliance and enforcement would be the focus of this administration, which I'm not saying is a bad thing. We all should be compliant. All should be looking to adhere by the rules. But, this hype about, oh, immigrants don't do it, is not necessarily true. Because our advice as a law firm to anybody we partner with is like, this is the requirement, no matter what the visa type is, these are the criteria, it's non-negotiable that you have to meet it. But overall, we are anticipating a much larger number of ICE visits, site visits, I-9 audits, overall punishment, if you're not compliant.
Is that a part of or in addition to the mass deportation that I've been hearing about that they're trying to undertake, which seems like, talk about the toothpaste being out of the tube, right? Or the horse being out of the barn. Like, how do you even do that? And is this I know we're talking about business visa and immigration right now, but I mean, is that those ICE visits and inspection? I mean, is that a part of that as well?
I think it's both, and I think that one of the mass deportations that he's been saying is super interesting. One, because there's a lot of reports out there about how expensive that is, and questions as to how do you actually even implement this? How do you know where these people are? But from a business perspective, one of the things that we have heard, and that's in Project 2025, is that if somebody is denied a benefit at USCIS, so say somebody's denied an extension of their status, which could be for any number of reasons, they would then be subject immediately for removal. And it takes a few days just for you to get the notice in the mail, and they have your address because they are mailing it to you. And so you're putting a lot of employees at potential risk for something that they have no control over. They're going through the right steps. They're filing the extension on time. It might be some other reason that it's getting denied, and all of a sudden they're subject to removal and being deported with, a number of other people. And so I think that is going to create a lot of angst with employees and knowing, when to leave and what might happen if they do.
It's really scary. Anindita?
I think, and I hope I'm wrong, because it's take two, his advisors are much smarter than three of us put together, from the perspective of implementation. So I'm sure if this is what's being announced, there has been some framework that they might have already thought through to implement it literally, like we're saying, and he has said, from day one. So that kind of worries me because, that will then create, an environment where parents will be removed from children because children are born in the US. It just will get ugly in a heartbeat. Does this problem need a resolution? 110%. Is this a problem? Yes, it is. Should we find a benevolent humanitarian way to solve it? Because there is undisputedly a value to the unskilled labor that this country has the privilege of having. We all know the variety of jobs they do. And is there a humane way of doing it? Still keeping it compliant to the law. When it comes to economy, they contribute to the economy. They're living here, they're earning here, they're paying taxes, whatever it is. So I am a little worried that they might have some groundwork already in motion, which might implement a lot faster than we are giving them the benefit of the doubt for. I don't know. I hope I'm wrong.
Yeah, interesting. And I know this kind of veers more into the non-business immigration, but I can't help but think that it's going to bleed over in the way that they enforce it and they execute it, just from a mentality and a culture standpoint. We got questions here. Keep those questions coming. Get in the comments here. We're going to prioritize your questions here. So if you're watching, let us know what your thoughts are. Poonam says, do you expect E-Verify to become mandatory in addition to increased audits and site visits?
Very good point. I think that is foreseeable. Yes.
Yeah, I agree.
Can you explain E-Verify real quick for those out there that don't understand it?
So it's a government system which is basically an online portal where if you're a member of the E-Verify, platform, then you can go into the platform and enter information, social security number, date of birth, information to verify the legal status to work of this person presenting documents to you in an I-9. So instead of doing it manually, you do it digitally, and the government verifies the documentation for you. And not every
So it's like an
employer,
extra layer.
yeah, not every employer does that. So that's what Poonam is asking, will it become mandatory? Realistically, I could see that also as one of the enforcement measures.
All right, I like to try to stay positive on this show. I think this is a place of love and hope and
Absolutely.
things like that. And Nafis, my friend here, asked a very positive question. He said, what are the chances that the president-elect will enact business immigration-friendly measures? Last time they expended the number of H-1B visas, it was under a Republican administration. Maybe we luck out. I mean, he's pro-business, right? And this is good for business. Could be.
If I can say something funny before we actually handle this seriously, I pray that Elon Musk is whispering into his head that he needs the engineers to maintain the Tesla stock and the Tesla business and his Star X and whatever else he has.
Yeah.
That's where
And
my better.
I think that a Republican administration in many ways can be positive for businesses. And so I think, looking at a potential trifecta here, a likely trifecta, I think there might be opportunities for businesses to help influence any legislation. For so long now, everything on the immigration side has been done at an executive level because the laws can't get passed through Congress. But if your Congress is Republican, then you actually can pass some laws. And I think this is where businesses could take that as an opportunity to really highlight for the administration their reliance and their need and why it's important for them to be able to attract and have that foreign talent.
So we're basically hoping that our greed is stronger than our xenophobia, and that hope.
Very well put. Very well put. I mean, Republican governments across decades have been more pro-business immigration. It's the Democrats who've been more pro-unskilled labor. So I'm hoping, but then again, is this a Republican administration? I mean, let's not get into that discussion. It is a Trump administration. So I'm praying that his advisors do value the talent that we all support to bring into this great country and advise them accordingly.
Well, let's not forget Trump uses H-2 workers, and that is part of Project 2025. So, there's an argument there that if he needs H-2, you can't kill the program. So you need to look at the other programs too.
Great point. Great point. Christian says money talks. Yes, Christian, let's hope so. We've been talking about what our clients need to be thinking about and need to be doing in order to be proactive. But I want to ask you both from the other side, from the immigration firm side, what are some of the challenges that you're thinking about and ways that you're planning? We have one of our questions here from Jason says, what is the biggest challenge immigration firms will have to overcome? I'm going to ask you this first, Anindita. Go ahead.
I don't see it as a challenge. And humbly said, we do this for an everyday process, but law firm partners, like I mentioned earlier, we have to embrace the changes. We don't have a choice about that. And, proactively support our clients and try to be positive in this environment to protect global talent. I don't think that's negotiable at any rate. Like the petitions that we prepare it in such a thorough manner that there should not be any RFEs. So do that work up front in the hope that there will not be RFEs or denials. That's one of the best ways. The other non-negotiable way is to be accessible to your clients and their employees. I don't want somebody waiting on a response to an email for 5 to 7 days. In our office, in our firm, it's a non-negotiable that emails are responded to within hours, if not one business day. So, this is going to go back to that environment of anxiety. So what is our commitment to these foreign nationals? To be there for them, to be there for the HR managers, to be there for the, leads of the companies. So from that perspective, quality of the work product, which in our experience has translated to industry-leading approval rates, and customer service is non-negotiable.
I agree. And I think that, empathy is a big component here. And anybody who was working under the prior administration, it's also just morale. If you were there under the last 4 years, there might be a lot of anxiety right now. And I'm kind of personally trying to think of this as a marathon, not a sprint, and kind of just trying to keep everybody's heads like above the chaos, above the drama, and knowing, we've gone through this before. We know how to deal with it. We're going to have some challenges, but how can we mentally prepare ourselves to kind of overcome some of those extra hurdles and increased denials and longer processing times and things like that, but also make sure that our clients are understanding why certain things are taking longer, why there are more hurdles, basically being there as a guide all of the time and the entire way for them.
Ben, you're on mute.
I thought it was just such a great question that everybody was just dumbfounded and there was like, wow, I finally did it. No, I said I'm a business owner and I'm always thinking about the silver lining of things and whatnot. Is business better under a Trump administration or a Biden administration? Is the law firm business better under a Trump administration or a Biden administration? Is there more work? Is there more to do?
This is a challenging question because I feel like, working in a law firm, I don't want to come across as like, yeah, we have more work. Like this is opportunity for more work. But I think because we know of some of the challenges that are coming, because we know that there's going to be increase in RFE denials, because we know that there's going to be additional hurdles that we have to go to. There's going to be stricter requirements. There's going to be extra work inherently built into some of these processes. And then there's going to be other challenges like getting people in for visa appointments and things like that, or exceptions to whatever travel bans are in place. That's just part of the job. But I think that there's so many other factors that impact that too. And, under Biden, you had a number of things going on all around the world during almost his entire presidency. On top of the pandemic, which was already going on whenever he first went into office. And so there were so many other things going on in the world at that time that do impact businesses too. And so that's a little bit of a tough one.
Actually, to answer your question, Ben, if you ask most immigration attorneys, and I definitely think he's being modest here, they will tell you to your face that, oh, you know what, we made more money during the Trump era. And if you ask me the question of being a business owner, also, I will say yes, because the Trump era saw close to 90% RFEs and probably 30 to 40% denials. And I'm proud to tell you that during that era, we had a 98.4% approval across the board. We didn't make that much of money as maybe our colleagues and peers did, which is great because, to me, it's like blood money. I don't want to make money that way. This is not what we stand for, So the polite way of responding to your question is disruption. Definitely, we anticipate a lot of disruption. Will that translate to more cases? Obviously, it's going to be more of a troublesome situation, a headache. I would rather take, 1,000 H's than 1,000 RFEs, so from that perspective. But, I will tell you from our own personal experience, if you prepare a proper petition, which includes all the ingredients of the law, we literally, I'm not lying to you when I'm telling you we had a 98.4% approval rate during the Trump administration.
Wow. Let me ask you, you talk about metrics and stuff, and this is kind of a black box for me, looking at this. What are some of the metrics that companies should be looking at as we go into this period, and we know there's going to be volatility, and we know there's going to be hurdles and challenges and all these. We get to dust off all these fun words for challenges, right, and start using them, throwing them around. But what are some of the kind of metrics that we can use to monitor our programs to say, hey, we're doing good, or we're not doing good, or we need to do something different? We need to look at it. What are some of the things we need to be putting in place for our corporate clients?
Thank you.
Tiffany, you want to go first? Go ahead. Yeah,
Sure.
go ahead.
Anindita, why don't you take that question, Anindita?
Oh, sure. Sorry. I think some of the stuff that we've already discussed, I mean, to basically make sure they're compliant, basically assess the talent pool to see how many visas can they file before Jan 19th, to reassess talent around the world. Are there people that they need to, get on visas and get them to travel before Jan 19th? Anything that would, and depending on the company and the requirements of the company, to basically do a quick, hard assessment to make sure everything that can be done before Jan 19th is done, is a simpler way to put it. And each company has different requirements, right? So that will be a very individualized assessment. We are starting to do that with some of our partners, just to have a very transparent, candid autopsy of their talent portfolio, to put it bluntly. So that they don't get hurt if something disruptive comes up on Jan 20th.
My only thing to add to that point is that at this point in the year, we are in a limited time period before January 20th. It's right around the holidays. Most visa calendars, at least for what's going on abroad, are going to be very limited at this point. So that is more of a caution as to there might be very limited people that you can get through before January 20th, given where we are. But I think part of this is going to be about, like, you're going to have to look at your program differently. You can't compare, the last 4 years to even the 4 years before that to the next 4 years, and as to what is success in your immigration program, because each of those 4 years have been so very different, both in the administration and the actions they were focused on, but also with what was going on around the world that impacts all of those programs.
I want to ask you, go ahead, Anindita.
Sorry, the tough question is, it might not be the right thing to say, but then tell exactly the example that you cited. Don't travel. Because you don't want to get stuck abroad.
Wow. Do we see that happening a lot? I mean, were a lot of folks getting stuck? I mean, where just a travel ban came up while they were abroad?
Absolutely.
The travel ban surprised a lot of people.
I mean, I'll tell you, and I'll try to say this in a very composed manner, but professionally, one of my most difficult situations that I faced in my 30-plus year career was when I had Indian nationals, grown men, crying on the phone telling me, Anindita, my father is dying in India and I can't travel.
Oh my gosh, I can't even imagine.
Our jobs are to help people. Yeah. And in that predicament, when I could not, being the immigration provider, the immigration partner, and being an immigrant myself, you feel helpless.
Wow. It really brings it home when you tell a story like that, Can't imagine. Do we see companies starting to say, you know what, maybe the United States is not where I want to put this person or this business? Maybe I want to put it into one of our subsidiaries in another country, because I think that the pathway to getting folks there to work is just going to be more, is just going to be easier. I know we have some more, isolationist, protectionist kinds of policies creeping up in various countries right now. So I know it's not getting easier globally. But are there other areas that you see companies maybe I'll put this function somewhere else?
I know we've definitely seen it, and we've had clients where, as part of our election planning with them, it has included looking at other countries where they have offices, and that person might be able to go, and considering the different options and at what point do they relocate people, to think through those things, recognizing that there's going to be challenges, and some clients have taken the initiative to do that earlier. Others have taken more of a we'll wait and see kind of approach, but there's definitely some consideration for other opportunities.
Yeah, for the clients that have the multinational privilege of having a multinational company, first place to go is Canada or Mexico, because you have the same time zones. So the end client that they're actually servicing is really not affected. It's just that the foreign national is obviously physically located in a different place. But now, like I said, as of October 3rd, Canada's come up with a few draconian laws limiting talent there too. Mexico is the heyday for most Indians and Chinese companies that have manufacturing needs. Mexico is just blooming, for those opportunities. But yes, if this is a multinational corporation, then you have to look at other alternatives. But the good news in this situation is, without a doubt, if you assess 100 global companies, I think I won't be wrong when I say, if not 99, have a majority portion of their revenues from this economy, the US of A. So they are dependent on the talent being here. So, irrespective of the government, irrespective of, who the policy advisors are, this economy supports the world, and anything that goes wrong here will have a trickle-down effect to any country around the world. So we should fight tooth and nail to make sure we protect this talent here and not lose it to other countries.
Yeah, so it's an excellent point you bring up. Sometimes we forget, with all the harsh, the things that are happening, the challenges that we're seeing right now, our economy still is the envy of the world. And what we do here, does have all these ripple effects throughout. Jana is mentioning here in Brazil, impressions are similar to the U.S. Many are very concerned and many are really excited, although I think the excitement here lacks understanding of the scenario. Understood. Speaking of Mexico, Christina here from, as we know, from Women of Global Mobility. We love Christina on the show. So from Mexico, Claudia Scheinbaum congratulated Donald Trump on the victory and asked him for dialogue and respect. She's looking forward to advance in the broad bilateral agenda. Those are big words. The peso took a big hit, but has since stabilized. Earlier, she addressed Mexicans, saying that Trump's win is no reason for concern. Mexicans say that they're concerned because when the U.S. does well, Mexico does poor. When the U.S. does poorly, Mexico does even worse. Yeah, super interesting, Christina. Thanks for the perspective. We've seen a big uptick in Mexican manufacturing, to Anindita's point. Now we're looking at tariffs coming in. Chinese tariffs especially could filter more manufacturing near shore to Mexico, Central America, South America, et cetera. Should be interesting to see. We've also seen the dollar already getting stronger. Equities markets have gotten kind of frothy in the last couple of days. So it's very interesting, while at the same time the bond markets have taken a hit and 10-year treasuries are taking a hit as well. So really interesting what's going on right now economically and geopolitically. I wanted to ask, as I know we're running out of time a little bit here, the audience has been phenomenal. So hit that like button and give our guests a virtual round of applause. But I want to ask before we go, Tiffany, your light went off. I want to ask before we go, I'm just kidding. Would you like to leave us maybe with just a final thought before we tune out here? Tiffany, I'm going to give you the floor first.
I would just say we know a lot of what to expect going into this, and I think that can be a positive, and that companies can plan around some of these actions, and that might change some of their recruitment and that might change some timelines, but there are ways that we can work. And I think that this might really be an opportunity for that influence to come in on the legislative side and for us to get some good employment visa legislation through, which we haven't seen immigration legislation in decades. So that could be a really big win if businesses can, put their efforts behind this administration and take advantage of a red trifecta here.
Yeah, great point, Tiffany. Anindita, I'd like to give you a final word.
We have to be positive. We don't have a choice. And in the current environment, which we will find out more from Jan 20th, our only goal is to work to protect and support our clients, our partners, and to protect the talent, the global talent, or I'd like to use the human being, So whichever way we can do it, we have to work collaboratively, even in the global mobility space. And I'm saying it as law firms together, as providers to global talent. It has to be reminded, for each one of us, we have to remember the fact that working as a collaboration to protect this talent is the only way forward. And if that's a necessity, if now the House is also proclaimed, red, then we have to be aggressive in pushing through legislation that will protect the talent and protect the US. At the end of the day, the US economy and all of us, we're all in it together.
Yeah, excellent point. And I think there's an opportunity for our industry collectively to make the business case for immigration, for business immigration, right? And continue to beat that drum about how many jobs are created by immigrants, how many companies are created by immigrants, how many companies are led by immigrants, and that immigration is the special sauce of America and the American dream. I think that's on us to tell our own story and to beat that drum, because nobody can tell it better than us, and no one can tell it better than these guests we've had on today. Tiffany Derentz from BAL and Anindita Chowdhury from USILAW. I thank you so much for being here with us today.